When it says joy comes in the morning, it means there's a joy of such intensity in the Christian life that nothing can put it out. And therefore, sorrow is always a temporary condition for a Christian, and joy is a permanent condition. Where Jesus is saying to his disciples, I'm about to leave you, I'm about to be crucified, I'm about to die, but I'll be back. And right now you'll be in grief, but when I come back and you see me, that you'll receive a joy that is very great. And they don't understand about his death, and they don't understand about his crucifixion and so on, and they're asking him questions. But in the process of Jesus talking about his death and his resurrection, though we can learn a lot from this passage about that, we're not going to look at that for a moment. And we're going to see what Jesus teaches here about joy, period. We see that joy is of the essence of being a Christian. Verse 22, so with you, now is your time of grief, but I will see you again and you will rejoice. He doesn't say to these Christians, he says, some of you will be full of joy, some of you won't. It's a fact. If you're a Christian and you've met Jesus Christ, you will rejoice, and it will be a joy that no one will take from you. Now, the reason that Christians must have joy, right, is that it must be a characteristic of God himself. We talked the last 2 weeks about what it means to be a Christian. Essentially, what it means to be a Christian is you come into a relationship with God which is so intimate that you catch some of his attributes, some of his qualities. Remember we talked about that? We said the theologians talk about certain of his characteristics which are called the communicable attributes of God, which a great big name, but it's pretty clear too. If you have an intimate relationship with God, you catch some of his attributes. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, meekness, self-control, and so on. These are simply communicable attributes of God. That's where you get them. Joy is an attribute of God. Not the sort of thing you think about much, do you? You think of this big guy up there with the flowing white beard who's touching Adam like this at the top of the Sistine Chapel. And you don't think of joy as being one of his characteristics, but it is. There's this remarkable passage in Proverbs 8 where it talks about wisdom, which was with God in the beginning, and through whom all of creation was created. Proverbs 8 talks about wisdom, through whom God created all things, and John chapter 1 tells us that wisdom was Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, or was wisdom, and the Word was with God. And Jesus himself at some points points to that. And if you go back in Proverbs 8 and realize that Jesus is looking at himself as the divine wisdom in Proverbs 8, and you see what it says about divine wisdom in Proverbs 8, it's amazing. Proverbs 8, if you go there, you'll see wisdom is speaking in the first person, and wisdom says, I was with him in the beginning. And through me, he created all things. And then it actually says, I was delighted in mankind, and I was filled with delight every day. And there's a Hebrew word used there, shakach, which is a very unusual word to be used of Jesus or of God. It's a word that means delight, yes, but it's a word that actually means to frolic. It means to jump up and down and clap your hands. And here's Jesus Christ using this of himself. He says, I didn't just look at mankind and say, not bad. He frolicked. He rejoices. Zephaniah 3:17 says, the Lord takes delight in you and he will rejoice over you with singing. And you think, well, wait a minute, this idea of Jesus frolicking, jumping around with joy over us doesn't seem very dignified. It doesn't seem very majestic. Oh, yes, it is. It's a majestic joy. It's a holy joy. It's who God is. And nobody who really knows God can be dour, because God is not. And therefore, we see, if you're a Christian, you have to have received this joy. It's essential. And not only is joy essential to God, but it's also essential to the gospel. You've heard the word gospel, right? What's gospel mean? Good tidings, good news, you heard? Well, that's a pretty good translation. But the old King James has a better translation. Well, how does it translate gospel? It calls it what kind of tidings? Glad tidings. See, that's what it really means, is the tidings that bring joy. The word gospel means the news, the facts that bring joy. And therefore, again, if you haven't got joy, you haven't got the gospel. It's the only news, it's the only story that can give you pure and utter and everlasting joy. As C.S. Lewis says, little ducks want to swim, lo and behold, there's water. Human beings get hungry, lo and behold, there's such a thing as food. And if you find in yourself a desire and a longing for a joy that nothing on earth can satisfy, maybe you weren't built just for earth. Maybe you were built for something bigger than earth. Maybe you were built for something bigger than this life. And you see, until you find what that bigger is, until you actually put your hope in heaven and your hope in Jesus Christ and your hope in the gospel, you'll never be able to fill up that hole there in your heart, and you'll never know joy.